smaller space.
So, Anne-Marie, talk to us about where else that aid
was there as well. We're going to see a returning of diplomats, and we're going to see more weapons. What are the Defense Secretary was there as well. We're going to see a returning of diplomats, and we're going to see more weapons. What are the implications of this trip?
Well, first off, it was symbolic in the sense that we have not had U.S. officials, especially this level, go to Ukraine, return to the capital in Kiev, meet face-to-face with President Volodymyr Zelensky since the start of that war. We've had other officials of allies in Europe, but not the United States. So this was very symbolic and meaningful, as President Zelensky said. But then he said it was fruitful. And then, Guy, you really mentioned two of the big takeaways. One, that the U.S. is going to be working on bringing back their embassy to the capital, and we're going to have U.S. diplomats coming back into Ukraine starting next week. And then the second piece of that is, of course, more financing and funding, military funding to 15 countries earmarked. A lot of that money will go to Kiev, as well as $165 million worth of ammunition. And this is really as the fight moves and is so strategically in eastern Ukraine. And this is where it's going to get difficult for Ukraine, because the geography is going to be able to try to contain Russia and push them back. But also for Russia, it's going to be much more easier for them to try to maintain that stronghold, because geographically it's obviously a much smaller space.
So, Anne-Marie, talk to us about where else that aid is going, because it's not just Ukraine, as you mentioned, it's a number of other countries. What are they and why?
Yeah, there's a lot of aid that's been given to a number of countries, especially Eastern European countries, that are, trying to help with the influx of humanitarian aid, but also countries that have been moving military aid into Ukraine that also now need to repurpose their own stockpiles. I think of places like Poland and Slovakia, which have moved some of their older Soviet-era military weapons and machinery into Ukraine, and potentially they need to now up their own. There is also one takeaway, I would say, from this meeting that really struck me, and it comes from Lloyd Austin. He said, we want to see Russia weaken to the degree that it can't do the kinds of things that it has done in invading Ukraine. Russia weakened to the degree. I think this is a nuance in almost how the United States see this. This is potentially no longer just about Ukraine, but weakening Russia as well.
Anne-Marie, could you ever see a situation where, like Boris Johnson, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine?
I could see a situation like that if potentially it was maybe months down the line and fighting was starting to quell a bit. You saw just maybe in smaller areas, and there wasn't as much of a potential threat. The way there still is potential threat in Kiev. I mean, if you look across and look at the Twitter posting of official Ukrainians, there is overnight, across the entire country this weekend, there were sirens to make sure people can take shelter. They're not going to send a U.S. president into a war zone where there's no U.S. military base when you have sirens going off for potential missile attacks or bomb threats.
Yeah.
But potentially this is something down the line, but that's a question, Guy, for the Secret Service.
Yeah, the Secret Service probably not eager to sign off on this one just yet. Thank you so much to Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Horder down in Washington.